All right, today we're diving into a crisis that's happening, well, kind of in the shadows of our legal system. It's called the justice gap. And even though it's quiet, it has absolutely devastating consequences for millions of Americans.
I want you to really think about this for a second. What happens when something life-altering hits you? You're facing eviction, you're fighting for custody of your child, or maybe you need protection from abuse, and you simply can't afford a lawyer. What do? You're forced to go it completely alone.
And look, this isn't just some thought experiment. This is the cold, hard reality for millions of us. They're thrown into this incredibly complex system and told to fend for themselves, even when the stakes, they couldn't be higher.
So this whole crisis has a name. It's called the justice gap. Let's break down exactly what that means.
Okay, so the definition seems pretty simple, right? It's basically the huge gap between the legal help low-income Americans desperately need and the actual resources that are out there to help them. Think of it like this giant canyon, with the need for help on one side and the actual help available on the other. That canyon? That's the justice gap.
And we're not talking about some fancy corporate lawsuit here. No way. We're talking about the most fundamental, basic human needs. Things like having safe housing, being able to get health care, fighting for your own kids, or getting protection from an abuser. These are the things that are at the very heart of the justice gap.
Okay, so with the problem this big, you might think, well, what's being done about it? It turns out there's an official answer. A system was created specifically to try and bridge this very gap. It's called the Legal Services Corporation.
Yeah. This isn't some brand new thing, and it's not a small charity either. The Legal Services Corporation, we'll call it the LSC, was actually created by the U.S. Congress way back in 1974. This was a deliberate nationwide effort to tackle this exact problem.
And this right here, this is their mission statement, their motto, America's partner for equal justice. Think about what that really means. The idea is that the kind of justice you get shouldn't depend on how much money you have. It's about leveling the playing field.
So who is this all for? Well, it's for everyday people who find themselves in a crisis. We're talking about hardworking Americans, veterans who served our country, families just trying to get by, and seniors who need a helping hand. These are our neighbors.
Now, since this is a taxpayer-funded organization, you've got to ask, who's holding them accountable? Let's look at the framework.
And this is the critical part. The LSC answers directly to the American people. And it does that through congressional oversight. The whole system is set up to protect our taxpayer dollars. But this also means Congress holds the LSC's lifeline in its hands, its funding.
So you can see there's a whole system of checks and balances here. The president appoints the board, but the Senate has to confirm them. But the most important power the legislative branch has, it controls the money. And frankly, this is where the whole framework hits a massive wall. Because of systemic underfunding from Congress, the legal aid lawyers on the ground are saddled with absolutely impossible caseloads.
And get this, it's actually written into the law that the board has to be bipartisan. You can't have more than 6 members from the same political party. The whole point is to keep politics out of it, to make sure the mission stays focused on one thing: equal justice.
So the accountability is built on a few layers. First, you've got the LSC Act itself. That's the foundation. Then you have federal regulations that spell out all the rules. But that third step, the annual funding from Congress, that's the one that decides whether this whole system actually works or not. And for years, the funding has been just a fraction of what's actually needed to get the job done.
Okay, so we've laid out this massive problem and this really detailed government-created solution. And that brings us to the central question, really the whole point of this explainer.
Let's just recap the stakes here. The problem is immense. We're talking millions of people needing legal help for the absolute basics. And here's a jaw-dropping stat from the LSC's own data. Their lawyers are forced to turn away more than half of eligible low-income people who are facing eviction. Not because they don't want to help, but because the funding isn't there. There just aren't enough of them.
And on the other side, we have the answer, right? It's not just a bunch of charities doing their best. It's a structured, federally funded, and overseen corporation that was designed for this exact purpose. We have the problem, and we literally built a machine to solve it.
So that leaves us right here. We have the crisis, and we have the response. But when you look at the staggering number of people still left behind, you have to ask the hard question. Is this framework, a framework that is constantly crippled by a lack of federal funding, really enough to close the justice gap? Is it enough to fulfill that promise of equal justice for all? And if the answer is no, What does that failure really say about our system?